Come on, you stupid piece of garbage. What's wrong with you, you dumb car? Jeez, what is the problem? Morning. Unfortunately, that's coffee and not a barley soda. Looks like a running engine, doesn't it? I mean, except for the other cylinder head. Looks like a running engine. This is a set of AFR 195 Enforcer. These are as cast cylinder heads for small block Chevrolet, obviously. As cast out of the box for this 377 stroker motor with this camshaft, which is a hydraulic roller Howard's cam, is probably sufficient. Good to go right out of the box. But I'm an idiot. So I've already done this cylinder head, and I'm going to go through the process on camera with the other one, taking the valves out and then polishing the ports with abrasive rolls. Just not trying to hog it out, just trying to clean it up. I did gasket match these, and I'll show you that. And honestly, when I held the gasket up to them, they didn't need any work. So I didn't open the ports any larger on these heads. Now, the intake manifold that's coming off of the car that's going to go on this engine, I will need to gasket match that because it does need to be opened up to match the cylinder heads. I only know that because I remember when I put that engine together, I checked it, and since it was going on a little 305 with stock iron heads and again too much cam, I didn't really worry about it. So for this engine, I am going to go ahead and match it because I feel like it. There's no reason to, I just feel like it. So the exhaust ports I've already polished, the intake ports I've already polished. So I'm going to show you the process of taking the valve springs out, polishing the ports and reassembling, thereby voiding your warranty. Now, if AFR is seeing this, I understand what I'm doing is probably voiding the warranty. I'm not really worried about that. The reputation of these heads are good enough, and the performance level of this engine is low enough. I'm not really worried about it unless they're just wildly out of true or something crazy. And if they are, I'll take them to the machine shop and have them straightened out instead of sending them back to AFR. Because I know they're not gonna honor any warranty on these after I've modified them. And who would expect them to? Only a complete idiot. So if you expect them to, you're definitely at the right channel because I'm an idiot. So I'm going to move the camera around, probably going to set up the little action cam, and I'm going to show you how to disassemble, and then what I'm doing to polish, and then how to reassemble. And the video is not going to be for all 8 valves for the 4 cylinders. I'm just going to do one on camera and then finish the rest off camera for a good reason. This cylinder head, and I don't work particularly fast because this is fun for me. I spent better part of a Saturday messing around with this cylinder head, taking it apart, polishing the ports, cleaning it back up, and reassembling everything. So, do you want an 8-hour-long video or 6-hour-long video? No. Okay, set the cylinder head up on end just to get to everything. This is one of these cheap Chinese valve spring compressor tools to disassemble the valves. I had tried with one of these to disassemble it, and the problem is I can't grab the inner spring with the hook on this style valve spring compressor. So I bought the cheapest valve spring compressor off eBay or Amazon, whichever one, and then immediately got frustrated and welded a nut onto it so I could use a socket wrench. Now, what you need to remember is the keepers inside here are very easy to lose, so you got to move this as slow as you can, and you want to keep everything in order. I'm using the camshaft box so I can keep everything in order. What I did do is I numbered 1 through 8 on the head and on the valves so I can make sure that each valve goes back in the hole it came out of. Because I've already noticed, looking at these heads, that when AFR set them up, they did take the time to set each of these springs up So they have different shims underneath the bottom cup. Bottom cup's down there under the spring because, you know, steel spring gets aluminum head, that's not going to work. So there's a cup there they go against. Several of them have shims to get the installed height and spring pressure correct. I don't want to change any of that. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to take these out, clean them up, put them back together. So get it where you can work on it. This part is sitting against the bottom of the dish of the valve. So that sits in there. This goes on the retainer, and I'm kind of holding it up just so I don't scratch up the head or anything. Actually, I was doing this the other way. I was doing it that way. So, since I'm right-handed, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do it from the other side first. Doesn't matter, whatever. So that sits in the valve. This cage goes around the retainer. And I have suspicions that this cage is probably tweaking and bending as I go, but it seems to be working. Then I take a wrench on my nut that I welded on, and I just run the spring in, and you heard that pop. That's what I was running into with trying to just use the other one, that the springs weren't releasing from the keepers. Now there's one lock that rattled out, and there's the other one. There's both of the locks. They're very small and very easy to lose. Now I just reverse the tool, socket wrench, and I back it back off. Take off the tool, pull off the spring, and then just give the valve a pop, and it comes loose out of the seal. And you can see there's a dish in there, and I'm just letting the tool ride on that. And it is making a mark on it, but I don't think it's going to bend these stainless valves. I don't think anything's going to get messed up. Now that is a set we want to keep together. And as I recall, yeah, I've got the retainers. I'm just sitting in the spring, and I put them in the box. And then I'll go down the box, keep them in order. I'm going to do all 8 valves just like that. And then at the end of the video, I'll show you how I reinstall them. So, see if I can do it from a little bit different angle. And just as with any time you're messing with a spring, you got to be kind of a little bit careful because springs under tension can pop loose, which gets exciting. You don't want excitement in your life you don't have to have. I'm getting a little magnet, a little screwdriver just in case. Some of these were a little bit sticky. You'll hear it pop. There it went. And that's the locks releasing out of the retainer. There's one. And I had to wiggle it a little bit, and there's the other one. Rattles out. And then just reverse your ratchet and back it back off. Being careful that you don't send the spring shooting across your workshop into the neighbor's yard, getting an inadvertent piercing. And the spring, there you see it was stuck a little bit on that seat cup. That's fine. Pull this out. And we're going to do it 6 more times. And then I'll show you how I've got set up to polish these ports and what exactly I'm going to be doing. But you get the idea. I'm going to do this 6 more times. All right, I'm going to see if I can get this to show up good. You see how rough the casting is in there, and there's some lines where the mold parted. That's what I'm trying to smooth. The actual shape of the combustion chambers, or the intake and exhaust ports, I'm not wanting to change that much. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel and hog this thing out. As you can see, there's a line right there. That's actually for clearance for the push rod to pass through there. I don't want to move that much because I don't want to make it too thin. All I'm trying to do is smooth all that rough casting out so that when you run your finger across it, all of this is, I mean, it won't be quite as smooth as this machine finish, but it would be smoother. Just so that everything flows a little bit more easily. Am I messing up some sort of turbulence that probably will improve things? I don't know. I'm not Steve Dolchik. I don't know head theory that well. I'm just trying to get that polished up. I'm going to do it using my old favorite die grinder with abrasive rolls. So I'm just going to go in and clean everything up. I bought one of these assortment packs. So I've got different sizes, different grits. There's a coarser grit and there's a finer grit. There's some of these 60 grit, which I haven't been using those. I'll probably use that on that intake just because I need to open things up. But the coarser grit is what I'm using to knock everything down. Then I'm going back over it with the finer grit just to get everything good and smooth. Couple things you have to be aware of. You don't want to touch your seals with anything abrasive. And when we're done, I'm going to take this over to the sink and wash all this off. And then I'm going to go through all these with a bunch of like pipe cleaners to clean any grit out of those guides. The other thing you have to be very aware of is these valve seats are hardened and installed, and the fit between the valve and these seats done by AFR is better than anything I could do at home with one of those suction cup lappers that you stick on and spin with lapping compound. That's really good, but they're doing this with one of those precision machines like a Surdy machine. So all of these are fitting better than anything I could ever hope to do at home. So that's, again, why I numbered all the valves. So all the springs and valves go back in the hole where they were. And again, I'm going to do the same thing down here with the exhaust port, just cleaning it up. Really on the exhaust side, it's probably a particularly big waste of time because the air is being pushed out by the cylinder instead of being sucked in. I'm also trying to avoid altering this shape right here on the intake or the exhaust. When I held the gasket up to this, the Felpro gaskets that I'm using match this port exactly. Now, if it hadn't matched, I would take Dicam, which is a bluing solution that cleans off with like acetone or carburetor cleaner, or you could just use a Sharpie and then put your gasket on and bolt it up so that it's held flush, and then take a scribe or an awl and trace the difference. And particularly with iron heads, you can open up these ports a lot. On these heads, the match between the gasket and the cylinder head itself was pretty much perfect. So I'm going to be careful not to open this up. I don't want to really burr it or anything. I did hit it a couple spots on the other head, and then I just took a stone and knocked it flat. But when I put the intake on, of course, I'll probably, the gasket has like a silicone impregnated that goes around that. And then, of course, you can put RTV around your water ports on the sides. So I'm going to set up my little action cam and see if I can get any video of this. Since it's kind of hard to get in here and work and see what you're doing, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to record. But we'll see. It's all chewed up looking, right? I thought I was supposed to be making this all smoother. It looks rougher than it actually is. Believe it or not, that is actually an awful lot smoother. Everything has been ground to this coarse grit, which is 80 grit. Now we have to go over everything with 120 grit. As you can see, my box of abrasive rolls is getting much smaller. That's the only one that's kind of reusable. Anyway, so everything has been smoothed. It is actually smooth to the touch. This is easy to do. All of these ports are actually now smooth to the touch down in there. See if I can get a little light. There we go. A little chewed up looking, but it's okay. I mean, that's the first grit. We're going to go over it next with, see, it is tough to get down in there. There's a certain, the mandrel is only so long. And when you're going down in, that lock spins, and you don't want touch. When you're going in these ports, you can kind of get in there and let it rub as you're working your way out. But you don't want to chew up this finished surface, and you certainly don't want to chew up your valve seats. So there's only so far that you can get in with this mandrel. They make longer ones. I don't have one. So we're just going to do the best we can do. As with everything on this engine, this is overkill. I don't even have to do it. So I'm going to polish these up with the 120 grit. There are some of these 60 grits, and I didn't use any of them because I'm keeping them for when I do the intake manifold. I am going to have to hog some material out because I got to open these intake ports to this size on the intake. It needs a little bit extra. So I'm keeping those for the heavy lifting. And if I have any of this 120 grit left over, I'll use it and then go to the 80 grit. I'll go to the 120 grit. But it's just going to see what I can do. So the next thing is, now that I've done everything with the 80 grit, I'm going to go over everything with the 120 grit and get it smoother. And we'll take a look at it after that. Okay, got them done. Polished up. They're really smooth. You can see lines, but you can't feel them. So, I mean, I'm really not going to worry about it anymore. I didn't hit any of the seats. I am going to go ahead probably and put a little bit of paste on there and just spin the valves once or twice just to make sure they're still clean. But I really don't want to try to mess with where AFR did the valve seats. I did actually I hit this surface some with the abrasive rolls, but I don't think that that's going to be a big deal because you can put a gasket there, and of course, you know, RTV around the water ports. But they're pretty smooth down in there as far as I can get them. They're done with the 120 grit. All the intakes and exhausts. Turn it around. The exhausts are all done. I didn't try to round over the valve guide bosses anymore. Mostly because this is, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a street engine. I'm not trying to get every last inch of horsepower out of this thing. Just make it flow a little bit better. Since I can, I'm here, might as well go ahead and do it. So everything's cleaned up pretty good down in all these bowls. I didn't do the combustion chambers, mostly because I was really concerned about hitting the gasket surface. I wanted that to stay good and true. Everything's still real dirty. So I've got to wash this off in the sink. I'm just going to use soap and water and the same engine brushes I use to clean the rest of the engine. And then we will move on to assembly. All right, I'm going to try to assemble one valve here. And I'm not going to do all of them on camera because that's going to be real boring. So I've got the valve and spring assembly that goes here. I numbered them. So this is number 1. So slide the valve back into its guide. And then we're going to knock the keepers out. Hang on to them. And then the valve springs go back on. And then I'm back with this tool. Line it back up. And then make sure it's pushing in as straight as it can. Oops. Sorry, didn't mean to kick the camera. And draw the spring in until the stem sticks out enough so that you can see the groove on the back that the keepers lock into. Groove there locks into keeper. And got some grease because these things are finicky, but a little bit of grease will make them stick a little bit. See how finicky this can be? Isn't that fun? Okay. A little bit of grease on the other one, just to try to make it stick. And I don't have that far enough in there yet. There. Got one clipped in. Come on. There. Now, reverse the ratchet and loosen this. And as the keeper goes up, it'll wedge those locks in place around that valve. Okay. Then, just to make sure everything's good and seated, give it a couple of whacks. And just like that. Repeat it 7 more times until you've got all of them in. And it's important that you put the valve back in the spot it came out of, because I don't know if you can see some of these, there's a shim below these hardened cups. These hardened cups are here because with these aluminum heads, the spring will erode the aluminum back and you'll lose your tension. So the spring has to sit in this cup, and some of these cups have a shim behind them to get the spring height right. That's all set up correctly from AFR, and I don't want to change any of that because these springs are right for the cam, because I called ahead and made sure everything matched. So I'm going to do the same thing to the rest of these. So it's just like taking them apart, only the fiddly part is trying to get that keeper, those two keepers locked into the groove on the valve, which is just that groove right there. So just like everything else, give it a wipe down. Slide the valve home. We're going to do it again. Another spring, retainer, and then we'll do the keepers and line it all up and get it all back in place.